Welcome to the WTR Healthcare Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. In today's podcast episode, I'm being joined by Doug Drysdale, CEO of Cybin Inc., which trades on the NYSE and CBOE Canada under ticker symbol CYBN. Cybin is an advanced stage clinical development company focused on novel psychedelic compounds. Its two lead candidates targeting two of the most pervasive mental disorders are psilocin-based CYB003 for Major Depressive Disorder, currently being dosed in a phase 3 program, and DMT-based CYB004 for General Anxiety Disorder, which is wrapping up a phase 2 study. Also joining us is my WTR Equity Research colleague, Robert Sassoon. Welcome, Doug and Robert, and thank you for joining today's podcast.
Good to see you, Tim, and you, Robert.
It's great to see you again, and thanks for inviting me to this podcast, Tim.
Before I hand things over to Robert to ask several additional questions, Doug, let me start by recalling our podcast with you nearly a year ago, which is crazy how time flies. At the time, the regulatory pathway for novel psychedelic treatments was under a cloud of uncertainty following the overwhelming AdCom vote not to recommend approval of Lykos's MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD. Disappointing as the AdCom vote was, and which ultimately culminated in the FDA's decision to follow its recommendation a couple of weeks after our podcast, I recall your perspective on the impact of Lykos's misfortune was actually positive in that it laid out the regulatory concerns ahead of the start of the CYB003 phase 3 program. So what lessons did you take to propel the CYB003 phase 3 program forward, Doug?
Yeah, that's a good question. I still feel the same way. I think it was kind of ideal timing for Cybin in that the AdCom and the FDA decision got all of these issues on the table right ahead of a pre-planned meeting we had with the FDA. We met with the FDA right around that time in August, and we've met with them again since in March. But that August discussion was perfect timing because all of these things were kind of fresh and on the table. Like I would say that I think we know this by now, that most of the issues was cited were NDA specific, specific to that application, and I'm hopeful that we will see a path forward from them soon. I think that'll go a long way to reducing concerns. The main issue that was raised by the AdCom, though, was functional unblinding. And a big deal was made of it at the AdCom, but in reality, in our discussions with FDA, it's not such a big deal. Functional unblinding is something that they're very familiar with. It occurs with every psychiatric treatment. If you're taking a benzodiazepine, you know you're taking a benzodiazepine, so there's functional unblinding, for example. And FDA's included in their guidance and in their input to us around phase 3 design efforts and advice to tackle functional unblinding. So our phase 3 design, fortunately, as we have breakthrough therapy designation, we have this ability to consult with FDA. We had a lot of input from them on that design, and as you said, perfect timing that it happened. Those discussions right around this AdCom. And so going into phase 3, we were very confident that those issues weren't things that we should be concerned of going forward.
Okay, great. That's really, really helpful. I'll now turn it over to Robert to ask a few questions.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Actually, going back to that FDA thing, we were speaking to somebody last week who was at a meeting with the FDA, and the new people at the FDA in the Trump administration seem to be sort of taking a more positive and understanding view of functional unblinding and other issues as far as psychedelics are concerned. Anyway, the Lykos disappointment last year shuttered the financial markets to psychedelic companies for a while, but we've seen that open up this year. Compass and Pathways and GH Research raised $150 million in each in the public offerings earlier this year. Atai also raised a small amount of 55 million from a public offering in the first quarter. So Cybin, however, recently entered into a financing arrangement for capital in a very different way than the traditional public offerings or private placements we've typically seen. So, Doug, can you explain the differentiating structure and why you chose to go down this more complex path?
Yeah, look, I think over time we've seen perhaps some uncertainty around how and when the company was going to raise additional funds. I mean, all pre-revenue biotech companies need to be raising capital over time, and the idea, part of the idea behind this facility was to provide visibility and confidence that we have access to a larger quantum of capital over time to finish out the program. So you're all the way through development and into commercialization. Of course, we don't need $500 million today that we announced, and we drew down $50 million, so quite a modest amount. And our intent would be, assuming that we like how this works, our intent would be to take smaller tranches, over time. And so our hope is that, and our expectation is that we could draw those tranches at improved prices over time. We have no obligation to draw any more on the facility. It's entirely discretionary and in the company's control. So I think it gives both control and visibility and maybe with confidence that there are investors out there willing to back the science in this way.
Thanks for that. I mean, would it be fair to say that potentially this financing arrangement gives you a runway through to commercialization of your most advanced development projects?
Yeah, of course, if we were to draw it all, yes, I think that it could take us all the way through to commercialization. As I said, this is at our discretion. So
Right.
as the programs develop and we have more data, we have more catalysts, there'll be other options on the table as well, and we'll make the best decisions at the time.
Yeah.
I think that this facility does show that there are investors out there that believe in the science. We're seeing an increase in inbound inquiries from new investors, large investors that are new to the space, new to the sector, and we're also seeing increasing interest from big pharma, which is just a sign of the sector maturing now that we're seeing multiple data sets being read out.
Right. And it gives you that flexibility, I guess, as well, from a financial point, because I guess for a pre-revenue company, financing is, I guess, the lifeblood of that company. So, so it's a very interesting move anyway. So, talking about your development pipeline, let's focus on CYB003. It's a psilocybin-based active agent that's going to be targeting disorder, major depressive disorder, and that's currently progressing through a phase 3 program. At the same time, there are several other advanced novel serotonergic developments targeting depression being developed by the likes of Compass, GH Research, and Beckley Atai that are in a phase 3 or advancing to phase 3 studies. Having seen the phase 2 data from these rivals, perhaps we can probe into some of the key differences. So let me start by asking you, what are the key measures that you would highlight to demonstrate CYB003's efficacy advantage?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, let me first start by saying that I think some of the readouts have been a little disappointing, and I'm not talking about efficacy necessarily, but the quality and the type of data that we can take away from some of these readouts. But we know that these compounds are active. We know they're efficacious. These 4 or 5 compounds that are being tested. The goal of phase 2 is to understand and determine the dose level and the dose protocol and regimen that you want to take forward and study in phase 3 in a larger population. Unfortunately, we now have 3 programs where the dose or the dose protocol in phase 3 is going to be different than that tested in phase 2. And I think that's risky. At Cybin, we were very thoughtful, I think, when we made decisions a few years ago to come up with a phase 1/2 design that determined precisely the dose and the dose protocol we're going to repeat in phase 3 in a large population. But you have 3 companies, Compass, Beckley, and GH, that are all going into phase 3 with changes that are necessary, differences to phase 2, and that's always a risk, isn't it? Compass, for example, is adding a second dose in the second phase 3 study. Do we know what the second dose should be, when it should be, how many doses? So it's an unknown. Beckley provided multiple, but Beckley's likely going to have to also test multiple doses. We saw robust efficacy from a single dose. but 25% remission rates, which I'm sure they'll want to improve on, because SSRIs deliver about 30%
Right.
remission rate. So they're going to want to dose multiple times. But is it 2 doses? Is it 3? Is it 4? We don't know. And there's obviously risk moving into phase 3.
Right.
And for GH, honestly, I think it's very hard to determine um, what to take away from that data set. And it's clear, very clear, that the first dose was completely unblinded. You had actually a nocebo effect in the placebo group. You obviously would have positive bias in the active group. So all the day 8 data tells you there is that the drug works. It doesn't tell you quantitatively anything. And we already knew it worked several years ago. So these programs are a little bit disappointing. I think that some of these studies going into phase 3 are going to be challenging, particularly GH. It was hard for me to look at the data and understand what the phase 3 design will look like.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people look at some of the data. They look at the matters whether it's based on direct reference to the baseline or relative to how it's performed against placebo or other sort of measures of dose measures. So it's a bit of a mix and different primary endpoints. You mentioned GH research, pretty short primary endpoint. Um, how do you explain the large differences in matters improvements when you take it all in a sort of a box between CYB003 and the other advanced developments? There seems to be pretty much quite a significant gap.
Yeah, there seem to be that, and it's hard to pinpoint, precisely which factor is driving that because we spent a lot of time tweaking different aspects of this, and not only the dose level itself, as we tested 6 different doses in phase 1, 2. The molecule changes we've applied duration, and of course we're using psilocin and not psilocybin. So psilocin is more efficient than psilocybin. You probably lose about 40% or more of psilocybin as it converts to psilocin. So that's one factor. We know that duration impacts the PK. We've seen some evidence in animal models that may improve brain penetration of CYB003. Don't know if that translates into humans. One theory is that because of these stronger carbon deuterium bonds, they're stronger and more resilient than carbon hydrogen bonds. It may be that the compound stays around has a longer residency on the receptors. Just a theory. Of course, we did push up the dose, and then of course we're using 2 doses of CYB003 intentionally. We see an incremental benefit in the second dose, and we're dosing adjunctively as well. So there's quite a lot of factors there. It's hard to tease out which one exactly that may lead to this increased efficacy. But we're at a great starting point. 14-point separation from placebo in phase 2. We know we're going to lose effect size in phase 3. That's very common. We've seen that with Compass. We've seen it in other studies. So we'd be if we lost half of our effect size even in phase 3 and ended up with 7 points, that would still make CYB003 about twice as effective as anything that's approved today.
Right. The other thing that is a little different from between CYB003 and the others that you've mentioned is that CYB003 is an adjunctive, so it can be taken with people on existing medication, traditional antidepressants, whereas the others are being studied as monotherapies. So does that play into the differences, do you think?
Perhaps. I mean, first of all, let's recognize that real world, by the time any patient gets to a third-line treatment, like we're discussing here, they're all on an antidepressant, right? So it's not like anyone's going to be on monotherapy. And then if you've got someone coming for a third-line treatment, why would you take them off their background medication? It seems a bit strange. So just from a practical point of view, real world, it makes sense. Like it could be that we are seeing synergy with SSRIs. We did run a small study with DMT that compared 2 groups, one group taking SSRIs and one not taking SSRIs. We saw in that very small study a 20% remission rate in the non-SSRI group and about a 90% remission rate in the SSRI group. So it could be that there's some synergies mechanistically. It could be that we're avoiding any rebound effects of SSRI withdrawal. We know that rebound effects can last up to a year in some patients. It could be that, that the patients are just a little less anxious because they're on background medication.
Right.
So again, I think this aspect of adjunctive treatment not only is practical, but it just goes again to show that the protocol really matters, and we know that these drugs work, but drug development is about optimizing the dose and optimizing the protocol. So look, I'm really proud of the team that made these decisions for us, several years ago, and it's great to see that sort of playing out the way we expect it now.
Right. So it does seem that you have proof of durability. You're the only company that's actually reported data at 12 months. I know that Compass did something similar, but they talked about time to relapse, which is a little different from real durability. Um, it does seem that the durability trend does favor you. So can you speak to any advantages you might expect from that in terms of reimbursements and access to those who need the treatment?
Yeah, like I think durability is really important. I mean, durability is the major differentiating factor of this whole class of drugs, is that we can dose acutely or dose intermittently or with longer term effects. And of course, each treatment session is an investment of time for the patient, for the payer, for the provider. And so you want the best outcome for that investment in time. We're developing both short duration and medium duration treatments, as you know. And when we think about sort of clinic economics and patient preferences, I'm not sure that the time in the clinic really makes a lot of difference. Because if you're a patient, for example, you're taking a day off work,
Right.
all of these treatments are likely to have a label that says don't drive or operate machinery after. So it's a whole day off work, whether you're going in for 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours. The clinics themselves, the observation time is not where they're making money. Getting $100, $150 an hour for observation time. And if they fill the rooms up with 3 patients or 1 patient, it's the same 8 hours or whatever it is that they're getting reimbursed. So that's not where they're making money. They are looking for economics based on on drug margins. So good for the patients if there are fewer doses per year, 2 doses with CYB003 so far, and good for the clinics because fewer doses per year means a higher price per dose, which means better economics per visit for the
Right.
clinics.
And
Um, so, I don't think it's just about duration, as some people are talking about. I think it is about efficacy levels, durability, and also tolerability.
right.
What is the experience, say, with a psilocin treatment versus 5-MeO, for example?
Right. So let me wrap up my questions. There's going to be a lot of data coming out yet to come. From the phase 3 studies, not only of CYB003, but all the others that are either in phase 3 or preparing to advance to phase 3. So, what would you consider, from your perspective, the minute you touched upon it a little, the minimum acceptable durability in 12 months?
Yeah, like I think that my perception, and this is sort of reading between the lines in conversations with the agency, my perception is that they want to see uh, data to 6 months. Beyond 6 months, it's likely that they would consider the next episode of depression as another acute episode rather than a relapse. Our internal metric at Cybin, though, has always been 12 months. We wanted to understand what it takes to keep a patient in remission for 12 months. We think that's aligned with what payers want to see as well, because then it's easier to compare, sort of the health pharmacoeconomics of this treatment every year compared to, say, SSRIs or compared to esketamine, for example. And the fact that we're seeing so far 70% of patients in remission for a year after just 2 doses really does differentiate CYB003 from other treatments that we're seeing. It means that CYB003 we expect to be seen as an acute treatment, 2 doses giving a year benefit versus an intermittent treatment where some of these other programs might end up with 4, 5, 6 doses in a 6-month period, which is intermittent treatment, not acute. And that has consequences for study design, sample size, safety database, and various other things. So it'll be interesting to see what these phase 3 programs look like as we go forward.
Well, I think the next 12 to 18 months will be really interesting with all these readouts, including CYB003 coming through. So we look forward to that. Anyway, thanks, Doug, for all those answers. I'll pass it back to Tim.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you for joining us today, Doug Drysdale, CEO of Cybin, ticker symbol CYBN, and thanks to my equity research colleague, Robert Sassoon, for also joining us and providing several thoughtful questions. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, Joe Brunetto. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as visiting www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, fireside chats, and conference schedules. We will see you next time for another edition of the WTR Healthcare Spotlight podcast.